An inquiry has been launched in the UK which will look at Iraq's invasion, intelligence used to justify it and the aftermath of the war. A panel of 5 experts have begun their work, which may last until 2011. The UK's Prime Minister Gordon Brown and his predecessor Tony Blair were forced to abandon their previous plans for a probe to take place behind closed doors. Well, the panel's chairman, Sir John Chilcot, said that the Commission's first results may be announced within the year. The inquiry will look at the events beginning from the summer of 2001 to July of this year, when the bulk of British troops leave Iraq. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined live from London by Adrian Pabst, a research fellow at the Luxembourg Institute for European and International Studies. Mr. Pabst, very good to see you. Now, what's the aim of this inquiry, and what's the difference between this and ones carried out in the past? Do you think that it reflects the hunger from the public for answers to some of these questions?
Yes, the previous inquiries were much more focused and much more narrow in their remit. The Hutton inquiry looked at the death of Dr. David Kelly, who was a scientist, and the Butler inquiry looked at the use of intelligence in the decision to go to war in Iraq. This new inquiry is much broader. It will look at the entire run-up to the war. It will look at the war itself as well as the aftermath. And as such, it will hopefully respond to some of the public questions. Why did we go in? What were the political decisions? When were they made? And what mistakes were made during the war and during the reconstruction period after the war?
So hopefully a more wide-ranging inquiry, but already it's come in for some guarded criticism, with the head of the inquiry, Sir John Chilcot, being described by the UK's Guardian newspaper as a former government mandarin. So how impartial will the panel be?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I mean, to call him a government mandarin may be a bit harsh. He's a former high-level civil servant. I don't think he's particularly partisan in his approach. But there are members of the panel who in the past have supported Tony Blair, the UK Prime Minister, who, of course, was responsible for the UK's involvement in Iraq. One of the historians on the panel has described Mr. Blair as perhaps joining the ranks of Churchill and Roosevelt, and another one helped him develop his doctrine of liberal interventionism. So I think the partiality of some members of the panel is clearly an important question.
Indeed. Now, do you think that the results of this inquiry could affect current and even future military operations, especially in a month which has seen, well, unusually high numbers of British casualties in Afghanistan?
Well, I don't think this inquiry will affect Afghanistan, because the UK government, both under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, has always been very clear that Afghanistan is separate. It's all about the Taliban. It's about 9/11. And therefore, I don't think it will have much of an effect on Afghanistan. But it will, of course, determine future military involvement. And hopefully it will lead to some critical questions about the UK's relationship with the US. This has always been described as a special relationship, as we know, but it's not quite clear it's really worked for the UK at all. Perhaps the UK should remember its own history and should remember the US betrayal at Suez in 1954. And one would hope that future governments will be more cautious and much more critical when it comes to the kind of military venturism we have seen coming out of Washington for many decades now.
So the special relationship coming under some scrutiny. All right, Adrian Pabst, research fellow at the Luxembourg Institute for European and International Studies, thank you very much for joining us here on RT.
Thank you.